Friend, we've come to an end. I painted this picture, but the colors don't blend. And now I can deal, cause I'd rather be real instead. I'm telling you, my friend, you got to your head. You tried to use a bandit, but you laid cement. And now I can say it's too late, cause I'm good on friends.
We're gonna go ahead and add the honey now. Starting out with a cup just to make sure that everything is at the percentages I want it to be. Alright, we've poured the honey in now, so now we just need to make sure and give it a really good stir. You want to make sure all that honey is mixed up and there's none left in the bottom. This could take a while. Alright, we're gonna take another specific gravity reading and see what we get. And it looks like we're right at 6.5%, so it looked like a pound of honey actually got us to where we needed to be. So now that our honey's mixed in, we have it nice and mixed in, I went ahead and took all of the additives that I described at the beginning of the video and I put them in here. So I'm just going to sprinkle them in on the top. And then what I'm going to want to do is give it a good stir. One thing to take note of, I put potassium metabisulfite in here. That's going to kill the wild yeast. But I cannot pitch the yeast until the potassium sulfate leaves the cider. So we're going to have to wait 24 to 48 hours before we can put the yeast in, or they'll just die. Alright, so it's been 24 hours, and what I got here is I've got a sanitized empty container, and here is our cider that we made yesterday. What we're going to do is we're going to vigorously pour it back and forth, and this is to aerate and get a bunch of oxygen into the cider. You don't want to be gentle about this, you want a lot of bubbles. You want to put as much oxygen back in as you can, so the more bubbles the better. Just try not to spill any. And all we're going to do is we're going to come back to this next one. Alright, so we've aerated our cider, and now the only step left to do is to add our yeast to the cider. What I have here, it is a White Labs brand yeast. It's an English cider yeast, WLP 775. The guy at Butler Winery, our local home brew store, really recommended it. He said when he made his yeast starter, it had already smelt like apples, and apparently this retains the flavor of apples really good, which sometimes some strains of yeast will strip out the flavor of the apple, which makes them not as good for ciders. It is a little bit more expensive, so we'll see if a more expensive price was worth it. And always just follow the instructions on the yeast. You might have different instructions. This one just said to warm it up and then pitch the yeast. So that's what I'm going to do. So it just goes in here like this. We're going to make sure to get it all in there. And it is important to note my scissors were sanitized. I'm going to make sure I get it all in there. Then I'll probably give it a stir. So I've sanitized the lid, sanitized the airlock, and I added a little bit of vodka in there. Some people use water. I like using vodka. I think it's a little more sterile, and it's worked for me in the past. And another thing is, you don't have to have your lid on yet. You could take a cookie sheet or something and put it on there while the fermentation is more vigorous. And then once the fermentation slows down, you could throw your airlock on there, but I'm just putting the airlock on now. So hopefully I don't have any problems with that. All right, I'll give you guys an update here. It's been exactly 48 hours and you can see that our apple cider's fermenting pretty well. So I'm pretty happy about it. I was a little concerned it took a lot longer to get started than I thought. So maybe this yeast just takes a little while to kick in. It is a cider yeast, so it could be a slow acting yeast. And we'll update later.